online telling us that we were sponsored for refugee status in America. And they say, let's do it. It sounds like a safe place. It sounds like we can, find refuge in a place that's not going to force us to question the citizenship problems we've been encountering in other countries. Small little, not even a city, it's a town. Twin Falls, Idaho.
I've heard about Twin Falls. And we're live. Welcome to another episode of Diaspora Podcast. I'm super excited to have my good friend Sejko here. He is from Bosnia, and you have to help me with the last Herzegovina.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
You'll get it.
Awesome. So, fortunately enough for me, we met at the gym. We've been talking for almost maybe 6 months. We've been talking about the podcast, I think.
It's close, yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm excited to have him on. To learn about his culture, about his country. I know nothing about your country. I've done a little bit of research in Google to kind of give me some information, but I'm excited to kind of get the information from the source, from the person that lived there. And if this is your first time coming on the podcast, welcome to Diaspora Podcast. If you've been here before, welcome back. This podcast, we try to explore immigrants, migration from their home country to developed countries. The purpose of the podcast for them to share their stories so that me and everyone listening can learn one or two things from them, and also we can spread the information about what it's really like to live in a developed country. I really feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there about the truth about living in developed countries. So anyways, without wasting too much time, thank you, Sejko, for doing this, man. So let's start. So Bosnia, I'm just gonna go Bosnia and H.
BIH, man.
What is it?
BIH.
BIH. All right, cool. So the only thing I know about your country is that you guys are bordered to Croatia, right?
Yes, sir. They have the whole coastline, really? So we can't get to it unless we go through Croatia.
So do you have to get a visa to go to Croatia?
Yeah. I mean, formally, you need to show identification at every border you seem to cross, right? But right. The thing about Croatia and Bosnia and all the Balkan countries is there's this sort of ubiquity and familiarity between them to the point where a lot of people just let each other go, because a lot of people will go from Bosnia, especially southern Bosnia, to just try to go to the beaches, for example. And a lot of times, the equivalent of Border Patrol and Customs, they'll just kind of like wave you through because they know it's kind of a tourist attraction. It's not so much of a permanent stay or anything like that. And so the times that I've visited the coast, right, there's places in Croatia like Tučepi. You just kind of go through. I mean, obviously you carry your documents on you, but a lot of the times you just, you speak the mother tongue with the officers or the officials working there, and they just permit you to go through, man. It's all rooted in that homeliness of what used to be the ex-Yugoslavia.
So do people in your country speak the same language as Croatians?
Yes, but that's kind of a controversial answer, and let me explain to you why.
All right, thank you.
And I think this is a good time to just touch on the topic more broadly, but Bosnia and Herzegovina, right, that is a country as of 1992 is when it declares independence. And immediately after it declares independence, we have wars happening, the Bosnian Wars, the Yugoslav Wars. What was Bosnia before we know it today, right? It was a republic in a bigger entity known as the Socialist Federal Republika Yugoslavia. You had 6 different republics that formed this thing. You had Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. You also had 2 autonomous provinces, but I won't get too much into that. But the idea was that Yugoslavia was a very multi-ethnic country of Bosniaks, which are the Bosnian Muslims, the Orthodox Serbs, the Catholic Croats, and if you spoke one language, you spoke them all. The only difference was in some of the dialect, some of the more specifics. So if you speak Bosnian, you're good to go inside Croatia. You're good to go inside Serbia. You're good to go Slovenia. They're all going to understand you, right? But in the colloquial speak, some slang you might say might be different. And so technically there is a Croatian language, technically there is a Bosnian language, technically there is a Serbian language, right?
Right.
But a lot of the times they call it Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, hyphens in between. On my free time here in Spokane, I work as an interpreter, and I accept appointments for Croatian people, for Serbian people, for Bosnian people, and you can see the nuances of those dialects come out, and you can identify the origins of these languages once you become familiar with them. But that is not to say that you don't understand each other when one speaks one language and the other speaks another, if that makes any sense. They all come from the same place because it all used to be one place before it was divided.
So how many languages do you speak?
I mean, if you want to classify them individually, you would say Croatian, you would say Serbian, you would say Bosnian, right? But to me, they're all the same, because I grew up with this mindset that it's all from the Yugoslav language.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So I think that's kind of what I was.
If it makes a funny joke I like to tell people is you can think of it like speaking American English, British English, Australian English. You're all gonna understand each other, but you can tell who's from where.
Okay.
Think of it that way.
Just got a different version of it. Yeah, because I was kind of thinking of that too. Because I was the one thing where surprised me when I found that you share coastline with Croatia. I was like, why do so many, at least developed countries, at least in America and UK, I didn't have time to Google this, but I know there's a lot of people that told me they're going to Croatia, right? I never hear anybody say I'm going to Bosnia. And I was like, if they share border, like, why is Bosnia not much of a tourist attraction compared to Croatia?
Croatia has the coast, The coast is a big indicator. I mean, you've got places in Croatia, for example, where popular series like Game of Thrones were filmed because of the surrounding architecture, because of the scenery, because of just the liveliness of the atmosphere. And obviously that attracts a lot of people. It attracts capital. Bosnia, if you look at Bosnia, it's more inline because, like, again, if you ever look it up, there's so many memes about Croatia having the entire coast and how Bosnians have to bypass Croatia to get to the coast. But Bosnia's biggest economic factors are just industry, agriculture, and then you start looking at things like tourism afterwards.
Right.
But yeah, having that coastline, I think, is immensely helpful to Croatia.
Right. That's amazing. All right. So now let's go back to kind of one of the reasons why you're on the podcast is kind of to talk about, how you got here and how settling, how you adjust and all that. So let's start from the beginning. So do you remember the first time you kind of heard or kind of learned of America? Like, do you remember?
Oh man, that's a good question, right? So I came to the States when I was 4 years old.
Okay.
And I should have brought my my initial papers that kind of show what it looks like when you come to the States as a refugee and just what that looks like, because I know so many people just don't know anything about the process. It's very strange.
Right.
They seem to just think you either just cross a border or whatever it may be, but it's a very formal process, right?
Right.
When I was a young boy living in Europe,
right.
Post Yugoslav wars, post Bosnian wars, my family were trying to obtain citizenship in a number of countries. First was Slovakia. That's where my mom lived and was born. It's also where I was born. But the problem with Slovakia, which is Central Europe, it's right next to the Czech Republic, right next to Austria, was that my dad could not get the citizenship papers.
Your dad is from where?
My dad's from Bosnia.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so I consider myself a Bosnian because even though I was born in Bratislava, Slovakia, the thing is, I grew up in a household speaking Bosnian with both of my parents. I embraced the same cultures and shared traditions, shared practices as the Bosnian people. All my neighbors and friends growing up were Bosnian. There's virtually nothing to distinguish me from all my Bosnian friends. The only difference was the geography of where I was born.
Right.
And the idea was, okay, well, me and my mom can stay in Slovakia. What's going to happen with my dad, right? So that wasn't going to work. So we can go back to Bosnia, right? Well, I mean, Bosnia is pretty torn by civil war. So is that really the place you want to take a newly born child?
Right.
Is that a place where you want to go with your family and hope it all works out? Is that a place where you want to go where, you have the PTSD and your neighbors have the PTSD, and all of a sudden people who are your neighbors, you don't know if you can trust them anymore? Is that really when you want to take the kid? So I think that was out of the question. So one place that we tried to, find refuge in was in Holland, Netherlands, and it was Helmond, Holland. And I was there for a little bit. I remember growing up there, my very early years, kind of what preschool would be.
And this is under 4, or is this after 4 years old?
So this is before I'm 4 years old.
That's crazy that you even remember those, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of photographs. I mean, I remember as much as a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old can. So there's some core memories, but it's the documentation that my parents had that kind of show me what it was like.
And they kind of tell you the stories too about everything.
Right. And so, I was over there, and, my friends in the Netherlands, Holland, also people who were fleeing from civil war, people from, Somalia, for example, who also were trying to find refuge there. And you have us who are these little children, multi-ethnic parents, and we're all trying to learn Dutch. The problem with Holland, the Netherlands, was, again, the citizenship. It just did not go through. My dad always tells me stories about how they had an attorney who was trying to help them settle into the country. And every single solution that was coming up was falling short of one family member. It was mom and the kid can stay, dad and the kid could stay. The craziest one to me is mom and dad can stay, but the kid can't. And, citizenship and the question of what you do with people who were forced to migrate is a very sensitive topic, because on the one hand, it almost seems so formal and bureaucratic that it forgets that these are real people on the ground. And it almost forgets that what other options do they have, right? Because the process tries to hold itself so tight and so well regulated. But on the other hand, the question is, well, what do you do without any sort of procedures in line, right? And so my dad always tells me stories about how Australia was next on the map until we got papers back from the States. This is 1998, 1999, telling us that we were sponsored for refugee status in America. And my parents talk about it. I'm not even 4 years old yet, maybe coming just up on 4. And they say, let's do it. It sounds like a safe place. It sounds like we can, find refuge in a place that's not going to force us to question the citizenship problems we've been encountering in other countries. And so August of 2000, we come to the United States. Specifically, we go to southern Idaho, here on the west side of the country. Really? Small little, not even a city, it's a town. Twin Falls, Idaho.
I've heard about Twin Falls.
Twin Falls. And we're sponsored by the College of Southern Idaho. And we get located into housing that was specifically for migrants and refugee families. So my whole community in this little beat-down apartment complex on 2nd Avenue in Twin Falls, it was only people like me. It was the Bosnian parents who fled war, people who it didn't work out in Bosnia, people who it didn't work out in Germany, the kids, some who ended up being the younger ones born in Idaho after that. And so my apartment complex was this little block in Twin Falls where it was just all of us children of post-war growing up in a very shared environment where our parents knew each other, not because they grew up with each other, not because they were neighbors, but because they had the same experiences and the same hardships to get to where they were. And so you had this hardship, you had this camaraderie that was developed between that community. And this wasn't just, Bosnians again. Lots of people from Africa, lots of people from Somalia, people from the Middle East coming in. And kids who don't know any better, kids who don't even know where these places are on a map, who become friends because their parents all hang out, because they understand how hard it is to come to this country alone where you leave everything behind. They come to this country where maybe you're like my parents and the only things you have are a shoebox of photographs.
Right.
Some postcards where you're writing to family talking to them about how it's going. Maybe some clothes, a little bit of money. And you get put into this apartment by the state, and now it's time to figure out, what do we do? And you're just happy that your kid doesn't have to worry about war. You're just happy your kid can go to school 2 blocks down. And so I'm only 4 years old, man, and I didn't understand anything that was happening around me. Right. But looking back at it, I could tell that how much of a hard thing that is for people to go through. People right. like my dad, for example. My dad was 43. He grew up in Bosnia his whole life, built his own home. Home gets destroyed in the middle of war, and he's not safe in his own country. You're 43 years old, and you leave the place that you called home your entire life.
You have to start over.
and you got to start over, man. And then you get to the United States, and to be honest, they don't recognize your education.
No.
My dad was a detective in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and he comes to the United States, and he ends up working as a security guard at a casino. Takes the bus on the night shift, rides 40 minutes, works an 8-hour shift, comes back. And first thing he does when he gets back, he meets me while I'm at elementary school, kindergarten, first grade, probably first grade. And he sits with me during my lunch period, just having lunch with me. And then he goes home to get some sleep, just to wake up and do it all over again. Right. Mom was the same way. She goes to work in a factory. And the whole time, house was still happy just because we knew we had something to look forward to going forward. You know, and so for my dad, I know, I look back at it and I just think about how difficult is that to build your whole life in a country, to leave everything behind, to come to a place where you don't understand the language because it's so fundamentally different, right? It's not even, I mean, English is Latin based, Bosnian's not. Bosnian's a Slavic language. There's no similarities in the origins of the languages. It's not like going from English to Spanish, English to French, so you're going Slavic to English. And the nuances are so incredibly complicated, especially for, 43-year-old man 46-year-old man, however old I am at the time now, is just focused on keeping a job and making sure the family makes it by.
And same with your mom too, right?
Same with my mom. She was a little bit younger. She came here about the age that I am now, mid-20s. She had me when she was very young. And she was more familiar with languages because she grew up in Central Europe. She wasn't in the Southeastern. She wasn't in the Balkans. So she knew things like German. She spoke a little bit of Russian. She picked up Bosnian very quickly. And I always think she had a bit more of an advantage because when she came to the States, again, she was, I don't even think 30 yet. I could do the math, but I don't want to get that technical with it, but not even 30 yet. And she still had her whole life ahead of her. The question is, can we adapt? What can we do about it? And so it's that shared experience because you look at a person like me today, right? And you don't hear the accent.
Right.
You don't see any cultural attire on myself, at least not in public.
Right.
And you would never pass me by and think that's a refugee. Right. There's no indicator to tell you that. And then you see my name and you start to kind of ask about it, where are you from? How'd you get here? You don't have an accent, man. You don't dress any differently than anybody else. And that's kind of the unique conflict about coming as a refugee, is that nobody recognizes what it's like to be from a place that's so different, and then you grow into the lifestyle here to the point where they can't distinguish you or tell you apart anymore, right? And all of a sudden, you're 18, 19, 20 years old now, you speak perfect English, you dress like everybody else, you're in the same schools as everybody else. Nobody understands the struggle that was there anymore because you don't have that background through your accent anymore, for example, through the way you hold yourself. And it's so unique because, we talk about privilege a lot. We talk about what you're given in this world and how easy it is for some people, some groups in America versus others. And it's always been so strange to me because, as a refugee, you go through a lot of that, especially when you come here so early on. And you're just trying to find that life for yourself. And you're just trying to think about how you're going to make it to the next day. And you're just hoping that you're not going to get kicked out of the country. You're hoping that the citizenship papers are going to be permanent, that the kids can finish school, that the kids can stay here and find their own careers, which it ended up working out for me really well, and I'm always thankful for it.
So do you think that was your parents' goal when they come to this country? I'm not saying your goal, but do you think like when your dad, make that leap, to leave, so his goal was for you to be able to have kind of like being able to assimilate yourself into the culture without people really telling?
I think so, because I think, as a parent, what you really want is you want to see your kid live their life without the fear, without the trauma.
Right.
And I think my parents put me first above everything else. And I think that's the reason why I'm in the spot I am today, is because there was a lot of sacrifice there. And I can't take that for granted, man.
Right.
You can't take that for granted because you can't be here without them. And it's really difficult for people to understand, people who are born here, right? I mean, already fundamentally from the very start, you don't have to worry about the question of citizenship because
Right.
you were already born here.
Right.
Which sounds so minute, so technical, but right then and there, that takes off so much of your shoulders because you at least have the security knowing that you're always going to have the institution of the country you live in protecting you versus whether you're going to have to get up and leave and go back or how you're going to find your way back or anything like that, right? You don't have to worry about naturalization, you know. And so, going back to your question, I think for my parents, post-war, I'm born. I think their primary concern was just how do we keep the family together? Because family was a very big thing in the Balkans.
So going back to where you grew up, around this kind of around all these other immigrants and refugees that was sharing the same story, that was in the same kind of struggle as your parents were at the time. Do you know anything different, or were you just kind of like a happy kid, just loving life?
I mean, how much can a kid know, right?
Right.
How's a kid going to understand what civil war is, man?
Right.
You know, I'll tell you right now. So, my dad's brothers, my uncles, both in concentration camps. Concentration camps in the 90s, 30 years ago, man.
They're still there?
That's too recent. And the thing is, the history of the Bosnian
sorry,
wars.
I want to correct that.
Yes, sir.
They were there 30 years ago in concentration camps,
yes,
you
sir.
say? Wow.
Yeah, in the 90s. Wow. Yep. The thing about Bosnia is that it had the worst ethnic cleansing to that point in the 90s since World War II. If you ever, and I would encourage all of the listeners of this podcast to look into it, but the Yugoslav wars, specifically the Bosnian wars, and the role of populist ultranationalism from far-right Serbian figures like Slobodan Milosevic. It led to a lot of ethnic cleansing of Muslim Bosniaks, of people who have my background. You know, my dad fled the country. He was never in a camp, fortunately. But my dad's brothers were, my uncles were. A lot of my dad's friends who he grew up with were in camps. And they have PTSD from it, man. And it's a really scary thing. Wow. And, you know, you can always go down the rabbit hole and look at the International Criminal Tribunal of Yugoslavia. And you can look at the International Criminal Court cases, and you can see all these war criminals and how we handle that. And you can look at the statistics if you want. But the fact of the matter is it was brutal. The ethnic cleansing was, like I said, the worst at that point until since World War II, at least documented. And it's easy for me to talk about that because I didn't live in the camps.
Right.
My dad wasn't in the camps. But, you know, you have people from my generation who had to grow up without their father because dad was in the camps while they were 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. And these people are living happy, successful lives in the United States right now. You know, they're in St. Louis, they're in Chicago, they're all over the country. And they're here because they persisted. They're here because they understood that you're not just meant to die here. And that's not easy to do. And it's not easy to live with the trauma. It's not easy to live with the secondary trauma to your kids through those experiences. It's not easy to integrate back to life, and it's not easy to go back and visit to a place that, quite frankly, left you to die, you know? And going back to your question, I'm 4 years old. What can I understand about any of this? You know?
Right.
What about any of that makes sense to me? My whole life just means, am I listening to my parents? Am I making it to school on time? I'm not even thinking, you know, to myself, like, what am I going to do with my life at this point? I'm just thinking, you know, I'm a kid, I'm having fun. I never really understood it from my parents' perspective. But I remember being in classes where ESL, English as a second language, right? And me and all the same kids from my block, that apartment complex, same time of day, every day, Monday through Friday, getting taken in and just learning English slowly, man. None of us thought about really, like, if we were going to be like doctors or lawyers or anything like that, you know. We just thought this was what life was supposed to be like. And then the older I got and the more I started diving into the history of things and looking into where I came from and who I am, it really strikes you, the suffering and the sacrifice and the perseverance that the Balkan people continue to have to this day, and just how strong the human spirit is when, again, you're rounded up by people that you grew up your entire life with, who are swayed by ultranationalism, who have political figures who tell you that your neighbor's the enemy, and next thing you know, you're laying on hot concrete ready to die, thinking about, is this going to be the end? And you make it out, and your kid's going to school. And you gotta be thankful. You gotta feel blessed to just have made it out, because a lot of people didn't make it out, And that's the Balkan dilemma. That's the Balkan character. You live through all that and you become a person like me. Again, no accent. You dress like everybody else. You walk and talk like everybody else. And they tell you, what do you know about hardship? They just see you as another white guy in America.
And who's telling you that?
What was that?
Who's telling you that? People that don't really know you, right?
So people,
story, right?
people before they meet me, before they see what my name is, because let's face it, I look like just every other white guy,
I also think that's because in America it's such a melting pot, right? You can't really know where someone is from, but that's interesting you said that. A lot of people definitely don't have the open-minded of like just listening or even just thinking of the possibility like, oh, this person might be from.
And so I'll give you specific examples here. Like, I'm in college and I had a lot of ethnic friends from all over the world. And they would be talking about some of the troubles they were going through.
Right.
Sometimes very citizenship, student visa related troubles, things like that. Maybe they were friends from Palestine who had to worry about the conflict in the West Bank, things like that. And they look at me like, what do you know? You white guy, American, you've been here your whole life. Like, what do you know about that? And it just kind of, it erases your identity. It erases the history you've been through.
I never thought about it like that. That's interesting that you said that. Because I have an accent, right? So a little bit, I can still have something that can make people kind of stop and listen, right? Because you don't have any of that. And then, that's interesting.
And I always tell people it's the same, because when you look at me on paper, right? My friends call me Sejko, but my real name is Sejad Muradbegovic. That's a very Bosniak name. That is a very Islam-founded name. Right. And I know when I send in job applications, when I put my name on documents, that they have a picture in their minds of what I'm supposed to look like. And then when they see me in person, I don't look like that picture.
100%, bro. When I moved to Spokane, I applied for, I think, almost 200 jobs. When I used my full name, Ayobami Ezekiel Gontadi, zero callback. I moved my middle name first, Ezekiel.
You know
I
how
got
it
called
is?
back. Yeah, it's crazy. You know
how it is?
People always say, I'm not racist, or I don't play favoritism, but it's a lie.
And it's not playing a victim card. It's not, pointing fingers. There's a very documented, institutionalized prejudice in a lot of our institutions that continue to treat foreigners like outsiders, And again, the main topic that I keep driving home here, at least in this segment, is this dual identity. What happens when, quite frankly, you're the child of war and you come here with nothing, but you also grow up here and you assimilate into the culture. You live on both sides of the world. You see it from both ends, what it's like to have it easy and what it's like to have it hard. And I think that flies by a lot of people's heads, because they like to think of it as either, you grew up in America and it was privileged and it was very simple, very easy, very straightforward, or you just came from the outside and it's always been hard. And maybe that's the best analogy for the second world, because who thinks about the second world, right? Who thinks about the second world? Because, there's the first world, there's the West, there's Europe as you know it.
Right.
And there's always this stereotype of whatever the third world is, whatever developing countries are supposed to look like in commercials on TV and, all this. You understand all too well, right?
It's always Hollywood, man. They always rescue missions always in Africa,
It's always, yeah. And they always play to this idea of the first world sympathy, right? They're always just trying to touch on the hearts of the Westerners, man. And it's silly, but who thinks about the second world? Who thinks about the countries who had an identity and were devastated by war, and are now trying to find their place in the 21st century going forward.
That's an interesting second world. So you're saying
Second
first world, third
second
world, second world.
I don't like segmenting the world into first, second, third.
But I see what you're saying though.
Sure.
You were saying like it's not an African situation, it's not an American situation, but we were content. We have system going on.
People are very familiar with like first through third world kind of stuff, right? But we don't talk about the second world because it's just so untouched, you know. And maybe this is a good time for just a little bit of history. And I don't want to dive too much into it because I'm not a textbook, but the thing about Bosnia, I mentioned at the start of this, was that it used to be a part of Yugoslavia. What was Yugoslavia? You got to picture this whole southeastern Balkan region as one big country. Again, 6 republics that made it up. And post-World War II, we're talking about the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. You had one guy on top, Josip Broz Tito, right? You had a communist party that ran Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia is so interesting because it's perhaps the most notable country that practiced non-alignment in the midst of the Cold War. What do I mean by that? You know, you have this arms race between the US and the USSR, and people are picking sides.
Right.
You have all these very tactical incidents in that timeline, like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
Because everybody's trying to get a side who's where. Yugoslavia didn't pick a side. Non-alignment. It didn't align itself with Western liberal democracy, the liberal markets. It also didn't align itself with the USSR and its planned economics. Yugoslavia was neutral during the entirety of the Cold War. And it worked. It showed that you didn't need dependence on one of the 2 superpowers in that era to survive. What's even more interesting that a lot of people don't talk about is the Yugoslavic economic system. It practiced what I guess is best documented nowadays as market socialism, where it embraced components of both market economics from the West while also exhibiting elements from the East, not necessarily the command economy, but of a more socialist economy. Free education, free healthcare, and it's a very interesting sort of economy. It's a very interesting sort of political climate, because on the one hand, you have a benevolent dictator, Tito, who you can't go out on the streets like you can here and say, death to that guy, and vandalize pictures of him in public because
you get arrested.
You get arrested for the night.
You gone, man.
But you're also not starving on the street, man.
Okay.
You can go to a doctor, you can go to college, and it was, for a lot of people, a golden era.
I see what you're
It
saying.
was a very prosperous time. It was a very unifying time because, again, this is post-World War II, the biggest threat in Europe, right? Nazi Germany is crushed. And the Yugoslav people feel united. They feel empowered. They feel strong enough to not have to ally yourself with the West or the East. And that's all good until the 1980s. So you've got about a 30-year period. And my dad, who was born in 1953, he lived in, this sort of golden era of Yugoslavia. This post-war era where the people felt united, where everybody was just neighbors with everybody. But the problem is, what happens when, the central figure of your state dies? When Tito died, you have a power vacuum that's created. And throughout the 80s, the country starts to destabilize itself. Some republics want to exercise control over others. And you find yourself in this sort of power vacuum of what are we doing? And that's when republics start seceding, they start declaring independence. And Serbia, which was the biggest territory of the ex-Yugoslavia, is finding offense with this because they don't want people to break away. They want to exercise control over it all. And that's where the ultranationalism comes into place, right? That's where this idea that these people are our people, they can't leave us, comes into place. And that's what led to ethnic cleansing because of people like Slobodan Milosevic. And so, again, the Yugoslav experience for a lot of people is this idea of you grew up in a relatively healthy economy, a relatively healthy political climate. it's not necessarily Western, it's not necessarily Eastern. And then you slowly watch your country fall apart. You watch it break up into 6 parts. You watch war break out. You watch your loved ones die. And you go through the struggle of leaving. And you just came into your 40s, man.
So that's interesting what you're saying. So you're basically saying it's almost like, for lack of a better word, it's almost like living in a small town America. Like, you're not living in New York, right? You're not living in LA, but you have your happy hour Friday, you have your events, you have a system that works for you, right? And you're happy. You don't have the big concerts like people have in the city. You don't get to go to big games, big NBA games or whatever, but you go to the local, baseball game. You go to the local hockey game.
So you even had big events because I believe it's 1984.
Right. Is it an Olympic or was it a World Cup?
Winter Olympics.
I know something was
Sarajevo, Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
My dad actually still has his badge when he works security over there.
Yeah.
And so
because
moments like that validate you as a country. They tell you that you're important enough to be here.
Do you guys win a World Cup too? I remember, I still remember hearing the word Yugoslavia in soccer somewhere.
Yugoslavia used to play in the World Cup.
Yeah.
And nowadays, or we've had Bosnia play in 2014. We've had Croatia play very successfully here this past World Cup and in 2018.
Is there Croatia and Modric?
Luka Modric.
Yeah. That's
Luka Modric, yep.
Savage, man. That's a bad man.
And what's crazy about that too, that touches upon this, is that's the Croatian national team. Yeah, my dad and I, we're Bosnians. We're watching that game. And we're cheering them on, man. Right. Because those are our people.
I see what you're saying.
Because we all used to be one people. And unfortunately, the hard reality is that there are still some people who, very hard-lined separatists who say, we're not the same. There's a lot of militant Serbs, for example, who will say, we are us and you are yourselves. But for my dad and I, who understood it as Yugoslavia, who understood it as one people, one language, why wouldn't we cheer those guys on? Especially guys who had nothing to do with the war, guys like Luka Modric, who, superstars in their own right.
Very professional too. Yeah. Never, no drama, no issue, just about his business. Now, I want to thank you for giving those beautiful background information, because I think this is what I really wanted to do too. It's like, I don't really think I know much about Bosnia or Yugoslavia at all. And thank you for kind of giving us that background. And I want to really get into for lack of a better word, you growing up here.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
And kind of when you once you figured out you're not from, like, you're an American, but like once you find out your background and where you're from, and I'm assuming thanks to your pops and mom and for doing that beautiful job of, not letting you forget who you are as a person and giving you that, that culture and that rich background of information. Do you think that kind of adds to your fire of being ambitious or being a person here in America? Because I really feel like a lot of us foreigners have that. We have that in us, where like we just, when you have that kind of weight you're carrying on, it really gives you that extra, almost like a superpower to kind of go hard and make yourself something to something.
I felt that a lot growing up, man. It was very strong within me. It felt like restless to show this world that I can be somebody, right? But the older I get, the more mature I get, the more I start to appreciate just how nice it is to have a normal life, man. To have a safe home with somebody you love and to have a future that you can build is maybe the best thing that we can ask for.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And it makes two of us, man.
And, when I was younger, and me and my friends, we have all these grand images of ourselves. Maybe some people wanted to be soccer superstars. It wasn't going to happen, but they had the ideas, right? Some people thought they were going to be, multimillionaires going from Paris to Berlin, just all over the world by the time they're in their 20s. Not going to happen. But, growing up, especially when I was a teenager, to me, it was about showing people around me that we're not just, the outsiders. We're not just the folks who are different, the people who speak this weird sounding language, that we're successful in our own right. That we're ambitious, hardworking people, that we're cultivators, that quite frankly, we have a lot of the shared commitments as a lot of people here do. This love of our neighbors, this love of the family, And again, the older I get, and maybe it is the privilege talking now that I'm finding myself more established in life, maybe that I'm finding myself more comfortable. But nowadays it's just saying, I'm so happy to have what I have that maybe I don't need more, because this is enough from where we came from. It's always nice to have more, but we don't need it. Having $1 million is gonna make life a lot more comfortable. Obviously, I'm not gonna lie. They always say it's easier to cry in a Bugatti than it is to cry in the streets.
100, bro.
But I don't lose sleep if I'm not a millionaire, because I still got the things that make me who I am and the things that I love, and I find a lot of fulfillment in that. The people who are in the concentration camps can tell you this the best. One of my father's very renowned friends, who's now a doctor in America, his name's Esad Bushkailo. He wrote a book called Wounded, I Am More Awake, where he discusses life post-internment, post-camps. And there's a lot of technical things in it for people who are interested in psychology. You can talk about the role of Frankl and logotherapy and finding meaning in life and all that. But for a lot of Bosniaks and for people like myself today and people like my parents, it was this idea of finding, normalcy, for lack of a better word. For the urgent being put aside and just being able to maybe enjoy the sun and have a barbecue with your loved ones. That really matters at the most, And it's so simple, but what do you have when all you had was nothing, right? What are you supposed to look forward to? And again, I think that speaks to just how strong not just the Balkan soul is, but the human spirit, the human condition. It's maybe selfish that we're always going to want more. We're always going to ask for more. But I like to remind myself that, sometimes it's okay to have what we have and be happy with what we have, knowing that there are good days ahead of us too, but that we shouldn't take these ones for granted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was probably getting a little entitled myself. Before I went home this year, I went to Nigeria for the first time in 10 years, this past February, and that was one of the first things I kind of, really hit me first when I got home, was just how much of a complaint person I've become and how much I've taken for granted. And that's, I'm also myself working through that, is because I've realized that America saw these dreams to us of like anything is possible, but also to you better really clarify what you want and have a really clear goal of what you want, because you're gonna keep running, and you keep forgetting the important things like family, quality friends. So of course, being married have really helped me to kind of redefine my goals and just feel like, okay, cool, what is really important? Because it seems like maybe I can be where I want to be at some point, or have the money I want at some point, but who's going to be there with me, Who's going to be there actually, who are the people that I can really call that are good friends? So, but at the same time, I think there's something to say with coming from a very hardship background. I think it really changed people. I read a book too. I don't know if you heard about Man's Search for Money. Man's Search for Meaning by
Viktor Frankl. That's
Viktor
the one
Frankl.
I referenced earlier.
Oh, that's the one?
Yep.
Oh, your dad know him?
Logotherapy, Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, logotherapy. Yep. Yeah. Oh my God. I read it. I think Jordan Peterson always talk about that book, and I read it last year. Just crazy. Yeah,
I remember reading it when I was really diving into my just understanding of the post-war psyche for a lot of these people. And man's search for meaning is fundamental to understanding that, because it's this idea that without finding some sort of existential nature for yourself, without finding any sort of meaning for yourself, what's the point of life, man? And for me, that meaning is spending time with the loved ones. It's being able to have a home, have a future with them, and go forward. And when we talk about this idea of entitlement and getting comfortable, and I can give you one really good example that, here I am in the West, and I wake up with myself frustrated because, maybe I'm not pushing up the weight I want to push up at the gym, for example. And then I look at my nephew who's in Bosnia, who's, 13 years old now, about to be 14. And he's happy when he gets boxers, man. He's happy when he gets boxers from the West because he can show them off to his friends.
Right.
And I'm like, man,
right.
I'm so removed. Like I just need to be like humble and humiliate myself for a minute.
Have you been back home yet?
The last time I was back there was in 2014. So as of the time we're speaking right now, my dad's over there.
Nice.
He spent the last couple of years rebuilding the home that was destroyed by war.
Wow.
So he retired. He took his savings. He went over there and he just started from the ground up. You know, and
that's beautiful, man.
I think the best statement to say about that is, you know, the second best time is now.
Yes, sir.
And I think it was always on his mind. You know, well, this was supposed to be my home. It wasn't going to be a bank's. It wasn't going to be somebody else's. There's no renting, nothing like that. No. And he's in that house right now. And he goes fishing, man. He's growing his own vegetation. He's got his own trees set up. He's right next to family. And that's family's house. And he always tells me that's going to be my house too. But, you know, here I am maybe being conceited myself, just trying to focus on setting up life here.
Right.
That I haven't been there in almost a decade, but that's not to say I'm not going to go back. You know,
right.
There's a time and place
for everything.
And when I come back, I really want to be able to just kind of bring the fruits of my success with me to all the family too.
Right. That's beautiful. That you shared that about your dad, and also just tells you about like you just talk about the spirit of your people. You know, just the fact that he never gave up, even though he left, he never gave up on that dream. And I know, like, and we just talked about it before the podcast. It's like every time you're going through a very, very rough time, a hard time, you know, it's always feel like it's impossible. And I think that's one of the things where one of my motivation to start a podcast like this, because I know there's hundreds of people from your country, from our country, that move to developed countries. And unless you are part of us, you don't really know what that is like. And because I'm saying, like, when I got here, you know, the first week, I had like, it wasn't like smart decisions I have to make. I'm making decisions like, oh, am I staying here or am I moving back? Because the money was so much, and you have to make all these crazy big decisions, and you're very vulnerable. People always wonder why people from other country get into like prostitution or get into bad situation, is because you don't have no right. People don't get that. And then when you don't know anything about being right, of the rights you have, or you don't feel like you're protected, you're going to get desperate and you're going to make bad decisions. You know, I did my own part of that. So,
and I had friends on my own end, you know, who they didn't get to enjoy the same kind of life I did growing up, because for me, education was the big thing as a kid, right? For me, it was just kind of like, of course, I got to do good in school and I got to go to college and all that. Like, that was never anything on my mind. You know, whether I had the money and the logistics of all that, that's a different story. But as far as, you know, the will to, for me, it was always, I want to learn, and I want to get better, and I want to do something with my life. You know, I had a lot of friends who I'm still in contact with to this day, who we all grew up in the same place. We all had similar parents, and maybe they just, you know, they had different ideas in mind. They had different goals, and they didn't get to experience maybe the privilege of going to college, going to university. You know, maybe mom and dad weren't so big on it, and they just really wanted the kid to just find a job so he can live by himself too. And so that's not to say that every single one of us is an innate success story. You know, we're not just, you know, storybooks that come here and we all end with a happy ending. We're people too.
That's a good point.
I think that's what people forget, you know, that I can only speak so much about my experience, but it's not reflective of everybody else's experience.
You still have to put in the work. You still have to put that time in. And
so, you know, I have friends who've been through their own things, man. Dropouts, people who never went to school, people who've just been working since they turned 16, 17. And it's, again, it speaks to the condition, that Balkan soul that I keep talking about, man. And
what does that mean to you, Balkan soul?
Balkan soul?
Yeah.
I guess to put it most simply, to me, it means this idea of coming from such a position of hardship and still striving to be a good person. And I truly mean just a good person. I don't mean a successful person. I don't mean, you know, an entrepreneur or hedge fund manager or anything like that. I mean being a person who people want to be friends with, being a person who is pivotal to your community, to being a good person, man. That even when everything else in life goes wrong, that you still try to do good. And to have that resilience on you, to have that sort of heart, because I think that's probably the strongest thing a person can do is not let the world pollute them and stay a good person to others despite what they've been through, man.
That's amazing.
And I don't
That's
know
beautiful.
if, I try to be a good person.
Right.
I think we all come with our flaws and our shortcomings and all
Exactly.
that.
All we can do is try, bro. That's what we can do is try, man. You've been laying some heavy stuff on me, but now I'm going to get into some fun stuff.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Because I want to learn about some food, bro. So
yes, do it.
So if I'm in Bosnia, what am I getting on the streets?
Yes, sir.
And what am I getting in the house? Like I want to get a cheat code.
Okay, so here's what you're gonna get. You're gonna have to play the podcast to remember it.
Okay, all right.
Sarajevske cevape. Okay.
That's a long one.
Cevapi.
Okay.
CEVAPI. Cevapi.
Okay.
It is a sort of like beef and veal sausage.
Okay.
Okay. You can find them in a lot of European stores around here too if you're ever curious. Yeah, there's one down here in Nevada that goes in and out of stock. It just depends. But cevapi. I say Sarajevske because that's an adjective meaning out of Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia. So Sarajevke cevape. These beef veal sausages that come from the capital of Bosnia.
Hmm?
Sometimes I'll say Sarajevske cevape na plažu. Now that means those sausages on the beach, man. Because on the beach, it's such a different atmosphere, man. The food just tastes so much better.
Tastes better. Okay.
So you go for those, and you pair them with a thing called Ivar.
Ivar?
Ivar.
Okay.
A-J, because the J is pronounced like a Y in the Balkans. V-A-R. Ivar.
Okay.
And that's a red pepper spread.
Okay.
They'll come
on top of the sausage?
You eat them with the sausage. Yeah.
Okay.
You can put them on top. You dip them. It's just in combination with the sausage. That's like the trademark dish of the Balkans of Bosnia. And you specifically look for, they have like a Croatian Ivar. They have a Macedonian Ivar. Okay. And, you'll eat it with bread. Bread's a very big staple.
I went to a Turkish restaurant when I was in LA. Mm-hmm. They gave us a red sauce that was like that. I don't know if this is however.
We're very close to Turkish.
Turkey was amazing, yo, because they give you like a pita bread to eat it with. Yep. And the servers, because me and my wife did it as a joke. Like we were like, I would have tried something new that we don't know nothing about, and the people there were really nice and all that. And they gave us like a meat like that. It was kind of a sausage, but I had no idea what anything is because it was actually like in Turkish menu. Like literally the names I'm in Turkish.
I would have got you some if they had some in stock right there.
But okay, so I gotta get Ivor and I have to get that sausage. Those are the two things. That's the street food, right? You're saying that on the beach, right?
On the beach, in the home. Roasting lamb, very big thing. They'll get the rocks set up and they'll get the lamb rolling over the fire. Very big thing in the Balkans. Turkish coffee.
Turkish coffee?
You can't go without it, man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. Is that here in Spokane at all?
I mean, they make it all over the world,
Really? I've never heard it.
Yeah.
Now I want to try that. What does it taste like? Is it like a regular coffee? What is different about it?
Maybe it just tastes better because
I know it's
associated with home. So
right.
Yeah, it's the kind of coffee that they serve you on the nice little plate and stir it, and man, it hits different, I think. But it's always been the coffee has been a big. You go to the cafes in Bosnia, man, they give you the Turkish coffee on the plate, and they give you the complimentary cigarette too.
Respect. They know how to party.
So, so you got all that going on.
They know how to
you got the lamb, the cevapi with Ivar. The drinks, man. My favorite one is kokta. It's like Coca-Cola, but it's not cola. Really? It's caffeine free, but it's still like carbonated, So it's like, I don't know, man. It's their version of cola. It tastes really good, man.
So when you went in 2014, your first dinner, I don't care if it's your family that made this for you or you went to a restaurant. What was the first thing that you had that dinner?
I don't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, man.
But I'm just saying, like, okay, what was the thing that you like? I can't wait to have this at home. Like that's what I'm trying to ask. That's too long. Yeah.
So much, man. Honestly, I'm just thinking to myself. It's got to be I think the cevapi, because I think the first day we were in Bosnia when we met family, we went to bed, we just woke up, we went to the beach that next day. The lamb, like I said, is always it's just a lot of meat, man.
It's just a lot of meat.
It's a lot of meat, like smoked meat, red meat. You know, the they pair it with a lot of stuff, the breads, the cheeses. If you kind of think of like what do they call them, charcuterie boards, but they kind of have a Balkan personality to them. It's very, very normal when you go inside somebody's house to just like set up a whole bunch of like meats and stuff like that they can just, hand foods, eat like that. That's not to say anything about the coffee and the cigarette you got too. So many people just smoke while they're eating too. So.
That's pretty gangster, like they give it to you.
Man,
That's
it's a very big. I'm telling you, it's a very big meat culture. Very big on like grilling.
Now that we've established some food stuff.
I forgot two other things on that note before I forget.
Sorry, yeah.
So if you'll notice, I actually do have a pomegranate tattoo on my left bicep over here. I would say that the pomegranate and the fig, two very staple fruits of Bosnia.
Interesting.
Yeah. The southern part, Herzegovina, I don't think I ever clarified that, but you've got Bosnia and Herzegovina, but that southern half of the state, that's what we call Herzegovina, has a very Mediterranean climate. And the pomegranates, we call them šipak, and the figs, we call them smokve. Staples, just absolute delights for people. And that means...
Everything.
It means fig cookies, man.
Really? Yeah. They have pomegranate cookies over there?
I don't know about cookies, but the pomegranates are
just
huge,
everywhere.
Man.
Huge. Interesting.
But yeah, go on with your next topic. I just want
to... Thank you. I mean, I still want to know... You haven't given me a dinner, though. I mean, you're giving me, like... the sausage and the haiva, but I still want like a dinner. Like if let's say I'm in a restaurant in Bosnia and Herzegovina and I want to have something, I want to order like someone that knows what it's doing, if you can give me anything that
it really is just comes down to the cevapi. It comes down to the beef, man.
Oh, like the options they give you, right?
Yeah, I love the street food so much. I'm just thinking to myself, now you got me feeling embarrassed because I'm like, when I go to the restaurant,
that's right. You got family, you get a cheat code.
I get anything formal, because the street food's so good, man. I'm a huge fiend for street food. So
me too.
Yeah.
No, don't feel bad about that. Let's go to music real quick though, because I'd like to learn new things, but new culture.
Yeah, let's do it.
What is what kind of music do you think like is popular in your neck of the world and that people need to hear about?
So you gotta understand one thing about me is my dad again was born in 1953. Right. So I grew up with the perspective, of a 40-year-old man who grew up in pre-war Bosnia and what that music meant. So my house, had the burnt DVDs of the music.
Oh my god.
Like just the really badly like burnt,
like the old
and
old
a lot of just like accordion folk music, man. One of the biggest artists in Bosnia, his name is Dino Merlin.
Okay, what is his music like? What does it sound like in America? You have to describe it.
It's like pop folk, I think.
Really?
He's on Spotify.
Okay. What is his name again?
Dino, Dino, Merlin, Merlin.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna have to check that out. I'd like to check it out.
All the kids knew who it was because all the parents played the same stuff, man. We'd like laugh about the music. Obviously, we grew up in the 2000s music scene here in America, and so we were used to like the hip hop, the rap, I guess the pop and the rock when it was still having its its height. 2000s music, man. And we'd hear that stuff on our parents' like DVD players, and whenever they were hanging out with each other and drinking and like partying, on the weekends. And we would just clown it, man, because we didn't understand it.
You're like, what are you playing right now?
But I listen to it as an adult right now, and I'm like,
it's not that bad.
This makes sense. I can see why it's popular. And nowadays, if you go there, the more modern music that they play at clubs is just like that, man. Just the pop, dance music, the electro music. It's just in Bosnian, yeah. It's just in Bosnian. And the thing you got to understand about the clubs over there, man, is they don't close. Okay.
They don't close?
Here, 2 a.m., they tell you to start packing your stuff up and leaving. It's time to shut the bars down, get your Ubers going, stuff like that, dude. Man, from what I understand from all my friends that have been going these past couple summers, because I was never really, I think I was 17 last time I was there, and I was with folks, so I didn't really go clubbing by myself. I probably would have got lost. But my friends who are there now and who go there on their free time, man, they go out at 2 a.m. Jesus. And they stay out till like 6, 7, and then they go sleep, wake up, go get like a brunch breakfast kind of deal, hang out, go to the beach for a little bit and they go party again, man. It's just such a different like lifestyle.
I can't wait for you to check that out. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So you were saying, so I'm assuming if you go to a club out there, so you're hearing everything from, electronic music to dance music, say pop, what do you call it? Is it pop?
Yeah, like pop.
Yeah. Nice. All right.
It sounds like our music here, just different language.
Just different, man. Right?
Yeah. They're not as big as superstars because I don't know what the phenomenon is with like, Western artists becoming like global sensations, but like, the Bosnian music scene,
mm-hmm.
You'll see people in public and they'll be treated like regular people. That's how it is. They're not like your like Drakes or
like Drakes, so they can
stuff,
go anywhere.
But they're still like very popular music.
Right.
People
I think
understand them. Yeah.
Maybe it comes down to the audience, or how much you can reach. I mean, Afrobeats right now, it's just like from Nigeria, it's gotten all over Africa, and the artists are blowing up all over Africa, all over America, in Europe, and it's wild for me to witness that. Like these are my countrymen, and that thanks to TikTok, of course, but man, it's wild to see them be global stars. Like people actually, they sell out arenas in New York, and that doesn't happen much, like you said, from other countries, but I think it's because now everything is global, but also you have to have a music that can translate, even though the Afrobeats is not all sang in English. It's in my language, Yoruba, sometimes, but they put a little bit of English in it, a little bit of broken English. So, and also the melody have to be something people can dance to. I think that's the most important.
It's rhythm, man. That's the thing about music. It sort of transcends language because it gets people moving to a beat. I think that's an important thing. Right.
I'm going to start giving you some harder questions now.
Yes,
now that we do a little bit of fun questions. So how do you find ways to celebrate your culture while being in America?
Obviously through the food, through hanging out with like-minded company, people, who I grew up with, people like my friends of my parents. But also, I mean, there's traditions Bosnians have, right?
Right.
I mean, Islam in general has Ramadan,
right.
for example, where people fast for about a month,
right?
And then they celebrate afterwards. It's almost like a Christmas-like celebration afterwards. And so, my dad, plenty of family friends, plenty of my friends, we always welcome each other when that's starting, when that's happening. There's been times where I've been to other parts of the country. I went to Phoenix, for example, and middle of Ramadan. This is actually a funny story, man. I was, I think, 14, 15, and one big thing about that is you also, in Islam, you pray.
Right.
5 times a day towards Mecca, right?
Right. My grandpa was Islam. It was Muslim too.
Yeah, I was not like a kid who prayed. But they took me to the mosque, middle of Ramadan. Yeah. So you had to wash your hands, wash your feet before you come in, very sacred ground. And they get in the room and then they have the imam chanting and you've got everybody on their knees basically doing the head bow. Mm-hmm. I remember being 14. I was scared as hell, bro. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just copying the room around me. And then you get up, the sun's setting, it's getting close to nighttime, and then the festivities start where people can break the fast and start eating and drinking and stuff like that. And so it was stuff like that that reminded me of what it's like to be a Bosniak. Because, again, the thing about Bosniaks is Bosnian Muslim. And while I'm not necessarily a practicing Muslim myself, I can't deny that my whole lineage is culturally Muslim.
Right.
From my dad back. I mean, they wore the red fez hats all the way to me now, and they'd probably see me now and say, "What have you done?" That's not that's not to erase the identity that's been there, but stuff like that, stuff like Ramadan. Of course, every I would say culture has its own like jokes. Like you grow up around the house, and it's man. I don't know if they're going to make much sense in English, right? But like, for example, for us, it's like a widespread joke across Bosnians that your mom's going to yell at you if you're like sitting on cement because you're going to get like a cold. Stuff like that, man.
Right.
It's those like ubiquity, those like small
It's
things.
only people in your culture that will understand it, like inside jokes.
We had like another one where if you accidentally like butted heads with somebody on like the playground when you were kids, you had to do it a second time, otherwise one of your guys' moms was gonna die. And so you'd have kids that'd be like, hold up before we like continue whatever we're doing, like get back together and we're gonna
hit
bump, dude. And now you got two stupid kids with like red marks on their heads because that's what it meant to be Bosnian, man. That's what like we were growing up with, you know. And it's just the funny little things like that, you know. It's the funny sayings, the customs, the traditions. Don't ask me about dancing because I've never really danced, so I don't know about that. I know all about the music, but I don't know anything about the dancing, man. No. But we also have this thing called rakia, which is like their equivalent to moonshine.
Oh, like your local gin kind of?
Brewed, the brewed
every country
liquor.
has that.
Yes, sir.
Gotta get a liquor flowing, bro.
There's always jokes about that stuff coming out, you know. Yeah, man. So I feel really connected to my roots just through those things. I still have a lot of Bosnian friends who I talk to every day, man, you know, and we make jokes that only make sense in our language, and we talk about the things that only made sense in our context growing up. And for us Bosnian Americans specifically, the thing that really separates us from our parents and our grandparents is that we grew up with the American experience, and in the background we have the Bosnian experience, and specifically the parents who are working in factories and the jokes that come with being, you know, the children of labor workers and what that means for us, and you know, waking our parents up because we're so loud and obnoxious, and how they're always telling us we don't need money for that. And
yeah,
so
it's no, you don't need that.
Yeah. So
thanks for sharing that, man. I guess the last two questions are going to be rough because since your parents are the one that migrate here, so you can't really be the one to answer one of the two questions, but I'm still going to ask you from your point of view because you're also part of their experience now, whether they know it or not. You've been the product of their hard work and the decision they made, you know, years ago to come here to this country. The first question I'm going to ask you is that what do you think finding out about your heritage, your cultural background, which is Bosnian, taught you about yourself? That's number one. And if you have other people that are here that are in similar situation, or maybe they come later that are born in America out of that heritage, what would be your advice to them?
So I guess I'm going to address those chronologically. Let me start with the first one. Man, I think I already forgot it.
What does you learning about being a Bosnian when you did taught you about yourself? Because you told me you weren't exposed to that growing up. You just grew up as everybody else.
I think above all, it taught me that life gets better. There's a lot of times when I was growing up and I would feel sad for whatever I was feeling sad. Maybe I was a kid and I didn't have a toy I wanted, or, you know, I couldn't hang out with my friends, or, you know, maybe I was a teenager and I was having like girl problems or something like that. But I'd always be reminded of what my dad and other family and friends had to go through to get to where we are now. And maybe this is like bad advice because I'm not like a therapist or anything, you know?
We're not, bro.
But
just your opinion, bro.
Yeah. And so to me, I always told myself things could be a lot worse.
Same here.
Same
here, bro.
I need to be thankful for this because I'm not in a camp. I'm not starving outside. And like, I'd still get sad, you know? Right. You deserve to have your feelings validated, whoever you are. You deserve to express your emotions in a way that makes you healthy. But for myself, the way I kind of coped with everything and the way I found myself in my roots was touching upon, again, this idea of the Balkan soul, this idea that we're stronger than this, and that all these troubles of today will pass, and that I will feel better tomorrow. Because if our people can survive war and we can come to a strange place with nothing but ourselves, you know, what's there to hold us down, man? And so it was very strange because I would tell this to my friends in like undergraduate and like school and stuff, and they'd be like, "Oh, no, you're allowed to feel sad." And I was like, "I know that. I know I'm allowed to feel sad, but why should I be holding myself down when, to me, people have had it so much worse, and they were able to pick themselves up and to keep going through it, and I'm just getting upset over stupid little trivial things, man. Like, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. And maybe that is just how somebody copes with the tragedy and trauma in their identity. But it's this idea that, to me, I just, again, I see the spirit, I see the soul, I see the strength of being a Bosnian, and it drives me through the day-to-day life, because I understand that nothing's permanent, for better or for worse. And it kind of teaches me to enjoy what we have right now, and again, it teaches me to appreciate that normalcy in life. That stuff that others take so much for granted is just so much to have, is so beautiful, because so many people don't have that. And, you know, I'm still pretty young. I like to think I'm pretty young. I don't know. A lot of the guys at the gym make me kind of feel old. But I look at it now, you know, and I'm just thankful for all that. I'm thankful for all the hardships, and I'm thankful for, you know, the struggle growing up. And I'm not saying there was easy things. Like, there was times where, you know, my parents are getting like documents, and I'm the one who understood English best in the house. And next thing you know, you got like a 10, 11-year-old trying to explain to their parents how taxes like work and stuff like that. You know, it's just silly stuff like that.
I mean, that's not silly. I mean, it's something you went through, kind of what you're saying.
Right. But like, people like hear that and they laugh at it, right? Because they're like, man, like, adults should know how to do taxes. Or, oh, my dad, again, like, what English did he know coming here? He just knows he owes money and he wants to pay the money on time. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, let me read these words as best as I can.
And you also being exposed to like responsibility as a very young age, you know?
And so, again, I don't want to, you know, beat a horse to death here, but it's the biggest part of that identity is the perseverance. It's the fact that, like Franco talks about in his book, the existential nature of not giving up, finding meaning in your life, and moving forward for yourself and your loved ones. Now, to the second part, what advice do I want to give to people who find themselves similarly rooted?
Yes, I think what I was trying to ask is, as you clearly painted, that you could easily pass to be an American. Yeah. You've acclimated so much here. That probably are other peoples like you as well that either are born here or came here super early, that they've acclimated. And I think part of human being is we acclimate. You know, I thought I was, you know, I'm Nigerian, but when I went back home, it don't look like me like that anymore. I've changed so much, and you know, they make fun of me as being a white person. Like, it's interesting.
Yeah,
but I had no idea. It's just like my mannerism and the way I act I'm a different person now. So either I want to be aware of that or not. That's the truth. That's the reality. So I'm just saying, I know there's some people right now that have not really do the work, because I'm saying do the work because it takes work for you to want to learn. You have to be willing to find your roots. And I've talked to so many people too that just would tell me things they hear on TV or through hands of other people giving them information about their culture, which I don't think is the right way. I think you have to have the willingness to want to know who you are, so that way you can have a clear identity of who you are, and also you can have something extra on your back. It can help you. What you just said is really beautiful. The fact that you were saying when things get hard. I mean, bro, I could have given up 100 times, you know, in America, but having a chance to create a better life for my mom.
Well, I mean, you give up and then what?
Exactly. Nothing else happens, bro. Yeah. But again, like, I don't even tell myself that way. You know, I think I think in this way, the way you think similarly. Like, I don't think I can afford to break down and
that comes with its own unique challenges and stresses and things like that too. But it's just the mindset, you know.
It's the mindset that
I want to do better, and that means like it's gonna feel hard, but I need to get through it.
Or like, I don't have an option for me to provide better situations for myself and for people that I love. I have to keep going. Yeah, we have another visitor from my cat. So Iris, if you had a cat, meow. Iris is saying hi to everybody. Hope you guys are enjoying it. All right, so I guess what I was trying to ask is that if you have someone that haven't take the time to want to know about their culture, what advice would you give them?
Let me just touch on one last thing you said there when you were talking about going back to Nigeria, you know, and they're calling you like white boy or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I came back to Europe and I went to the beach, man. I was wearing my bathing suit, my like swim attire was like what you'd see in the US, like those like long like board shorts.
Yeah.
Everybody on the beach Speedos.
I
look like a clown,
man. You
man.
guys are wild, bro.
I
I'm
look
not
like
gonna
a
lie,
clown.
man. Europeans are wild, man.
I
don't
look
know how
like
you
a
guys
clown.
do it.
I was 14. I've never felt so embarrassed because I would wear like Hollister swim shorts that went like past my knees.
Right.
And I was like, this is what like cool guys wear, you know, in the States.
Right.
And I wore that on the beach. I've never felt stupider in my life, man. And I've never so quickly switched up to just like the mid-trunk like Speedo in my life. And I look back at it, I was like, I needed to be humbled like that. But if I could give advice to the people who might be listening or, you know, might stumble across this someday, it's this idea that, you know, you gotta embrace who you are, and that's not gonna always be easy. Like, people are always gonna say your last name's really hard to pronounce, and they're gonna tell you, oh, you don't have an accent, or they're always gonna say stuff like that, man. Okay, and sometimes it is a microaggression. I think a lot of the times people just aren't acquainted with how it comes off, and they're trying to just be nice about it and make like light of getting to know you and familiarize yourself with you. But the way I would always tell my friends the advice is, whenever people ask you who you are, we always tell them we're the part of Europe that wasn't the colonizers, man. Yeah, we were the Balkans. We were hanging out with the Turks, drinking the coffee and the tea, eating the figs and the pomegranates, man. We weren't all these like, we weren't a part of like France and like England and all of them. And just that like slight joke right there just tells you how different you are from the rest of like continental Europe, you know, and how you guys grew up in the power dynamics. You know, our people, like I just joked about, we weren't the colonizers, we were the sufferers to our neighbors, and that came with its own hardships. And maybe hardship is the word that defines the Balkan people, but in analogy to that is, what do you get when you overcome hardship? Is strength, is perseverance. And so to the people listening who find themselves in these situations, maybe specifically Bosnian Americans who grew up with parents that were just trying to adapt to the United States for their own sake and their kids' sake going forward, it's to remember those identities and who we are. Because I know so many of the younger kids that were born here after their parents already migrated, right? Kids who don't have those core memories of being on the other side and getting the papers and then coming over, you know. They were citizens from birth, no naturalization to worry about when you turn 18, no U.S. citizenship test, nothing like that. And the thing about with these kids born in like 03, 04 or whatever, who are becoming adults now, is I know a lot of them don't even speak Bosnian back to like their folks back at home. They just pick up English. And that's not a bad thing, you know. Maybe the folks are trying to also get their English better and more like modern and stuff like that. But to the younger audience, like, they shouldn't feel ashamed of who they are, and they shouldn't try to hide, you know, where they came from or that they speak a different language. It's not stupid to speak Bosnian at home. It's not stupid to tell people you're Bosnian and that it comes with a struggle. It's not embarrassing to tell people that your folks worked in like a factory or as a security or whatever it is. You know, it's not embarrassing to be vulnerable, because just to tell people of what you came through and that you're still committed to going through the whole route, it says so much about you, you know. And here I am, I come to the States, I'm almost 4 years old, and I'm in English as a second language. I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. And, you know, nowadays I'm getting ready to be an attorney. I'm with somebody I love very much. We're getting ready to settle into our first home. And I look back at all that and I say to myself, would I have had the same commitment if it wasn't like that? You know, and you just can't give up, man. You can't just say, this sucks, you know, this is pointless, I'm gonna go do some trivial job instead of something I want to do. Like, just push yourself, man. You gotta be scared. I always tell people, you know, sometimes just 30 seconds of raw bravery and telling yourself, I can do this, might be enough to change your life. It might be enough to go out and meet somebody new. It might be enough to apply for that job. It might be enough to say to yourself, I want to give school a chance. It might be enough to say, I want to move somewhere else. And to people who have been so vulnerable, who come from a lineage of struggling, of suffering. You know, your parents came here from a different country. Maybe you came here from a different country. You've overcome it, man. You can do it again. And you're stronger than you think. That's what I would tell the people who find themselves in kind of a similar paradigm life experience that I'm experiencing.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. Thanks for sharing that. And to end the podcast, I'm gonna end with a harder one. I have to keep the best for the last. You know what I'm saying? So, this one is more directed. I will have addressed this to you if you were the person that first came here, but you were part of the journey because you were in the plane when your parents were coming. Yep. But now, I want you to think of when your parents were leaving Holland after they've left home. If you have the chance to roll back time, which we can do, and you can give your dad and your mom one advice, knowing everything you know now, what will you say to them?
I would just hug them and I would tell them it's going to be okay. That's all they need to know.
Is there?
They don't need to hear that kid's going to be a lawyer.
Yeah, they don't need all that.
I'm just going to hug them real time. I'm going to tell them it's going to be okay. It's not going to be easy every day.
And then what does that confirmation also give you right now as you embark on a new journey in your life?
Every day is a beautiful day, man. What's there not to be happy about? Like I said, from people who watch their country fall apart to embracing the normal life nowadays and just being able for, myself to start my own life here, for my dad to go back and build a home that was destroyed in warfare. What more is there to ask for, man? That's enough.
It's the dream, bro. Bro, this has been interesting, man. I think it's the first time in the podcast I actually have a legit history lesson of like a part of the country, of part of the world that I knew nothing about. And this is why, like, sometimes I stop myself from watching YouTube videos because I feel like that can create like a pre-notion about the idea of what the place is about, and that's why you kind of get it from someone else, and you don't really know. But man, thank you so much, bro. I appreciate it so much, man. This has been everything I ever hope it is, and I hope people listening to were able to just kind of get a glimpse into the
duality of being a refugee, of coming from the second world, and the perseverance of the Balkan soul, man.
Balkan soul, man. I'm gonna put that on my heart now, man. So thank you so much, Sejko. I appreciate you, bro. And that is it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you're first time, please subscribe for more. I appreciate you guys. God bless.